Al-Jazeera video explains Iran and RGC.
Parliament every 4 years. Hidden in a bunker. In June 2025, with US and Israeli airstrikes pounding Tehran, Iran's supreme leader did something he has avoided doing for years. He picked a successor. Actually, he picked 3 potential successors, all senior clerics. This was because the threats against his life were becoming real. Israel wanted to take him out. The US wasn't opposed to it either. And so, hidden in a bunker at an undisclosed location, Ayatollah Ali Khamenei wrote down 3 names. Ones that would be kept secret as long as he remained in power, as long as he remained alive. But this isn't how Iran's most senior political and religious figure is meant to be chosen. So why the secrecy? That tells us something about how power works in Iran and what Iran's powerful are truly afraid of. Iran has an elected president, but he has a limited portfolio. It has a national military, but also another parallel army that's even stronger. It has influential business leaders, but it's the religious charities that make the real money. On paper, this complicated network of economic, religious, and military alliances is meant to maintain a balance. In reality, it's led to a web of competing interests, mistrust, and corruption. A web that's left only one person who is truly in control. One person holding it all together. Iran has enemies, powerful ones, who have used crippling sanctions and military might to isolate the country and push its economy to the brink of collapse. And that has exposed the deep fractures within its society, the growing disillusionment with its elites, and a desire by many for change. But the deeper the crisis gets, the wider the web is spun. The more powerful the state becomes, the weaker its society. To understand what is happening in Iran today, we need to talk about the country's history of revolution and how it led to this delicate balancing act between theocracy, democracy, and the military, one that could now be unraveling. I'm Mohammed Hasan, and this is Pinchpoint, where politics and geography collide. We need to talk about Iran's revolution, but not the one you're probably thinking of. Not the one in 1979, the one that happened 7 decades earlier, the Constitutional Revolution. In 1905, 3 groups came together to demand change and representation. They were the clerics, merchants, and secular reformists. The clerics represented Iran's communities in rural provinces and their traditional ties to Islam. The reformists wanted to modernize Iran and create a democratic state in line with liberal Europe. And the merchants, or the bazaar, represented the growing middle class, the business interests that weaved the country together. Historically, power in Iran was decentralized. Each region had its own internal politics, its own leaders, and made its own decisions. It's why religious clerics hold so much influence. If you had a problem, you went to your local mosque and spoke to the imam. This is what historian Mehran Kamrava calls a strong society with a weak state.
History of modern Iran, like the history of many other countries, is made up of this almost constant struggle between state and society, between people in possession of institutions and instruments of power, trying to force their ideology, their agenda, their policies on a society that beats to its own rhythm. Sometimes is receptive to these pressures from above, and sometimes either is oblivious and doesn't want to have anything to do with it, and sometimes outright resents it. And so this state-society tension is one of the defining factors, in fact, the defining factor.
While this lack of a strong centralized state meant each region could be left to govern its own affairs, it left Iran at the mercy of foreign powers. They saw Iran as the bridge between East and West, fertile, resource-rich, and located conveniently along both ancient and modern supply routes. In other words, prime real estate. Throughout much of the 19th and 20th centuries, Russia and Britain often controlled different parts of Iran at once, trying to edge each other out through competing political and business deals with Iran's leaders. When they weren't helping one ruler stay in power, they were overthrowing another who wasn't playing ball. But Iran's society was changing, becoming more urbanized. Young people moved to the cities to seek education and career prospects. There, the 3 sectors of Iran's society began to work with each other to imagine the type of state that could protect them from predatory colonial forces. A modern state that represented all its sectors, but one that would impose limits on absolute power. Together, they wrote a constitution and established an elected parliament, or majlis. They overthrew the Qajar dynasty and tried to usher in the change that would bring Iran into the 20th century.
It's one thing to capture power, it's another to hold on to it and to be able to implement your ideas and to administer a country as vast and in a historically critical juncture when colonial powers have designs on it as Iran. The constitutional revolution never really is able to consolidate itself past maybe 5 years at most. And so that vacuum and political paralysis provides and facilitates an opportunity for a military strongman to step in, Reza Khan Pahlavi.
A military commander with grand ambitions, Reza Pahlavi instead sidelined the parliament and the clergy, crowning himself a Shah, a king. But with all this power, he was still unable to protect Iran from foreign influence. During World War II, Britain and Russia invaded once again, forcing him to abdicate to his son, Mohammad Reza Pahlavi, someone they could work with. In 1943, Stalin, Churchill, and Roosevelt held a conference in Tehran to debate how they could divide Iran amongst themselves and how they could keep it out of Germany's control, all while Iran's people were forced to watch. A decade later, Britain and the CIA overthrew Iran's Prime Minister, Mohammad Mossadegh, a leader of the Constitutional Revolution, after he nationalized the country's oil sector. That left the Shah with uncontested rule once more. He passed economic reforms and liberalized the country, but under his watch, powerful secret police trained by the CIA went after democratic and religious leaders, imposing a climate of fear and control. By the 1970s, worsening economic conditions pushed more people into the cities, converging the three sectors of society as revolution was again in the air. The bazaar merchants went on strike, the students protested, the clerics urged their congregations to leave the mosques and take to the streets.
Literally the same forces that are still, I mean, it's reductive, but these are the same forces that are still in play. Like the last round of protests started with the bazaris, like the merchant class, and then the students obviously joined in quickly thereafter. As far as the clergy goes, like as far as the clergy goes, like I would say that they are obviously pro-Ayatollah.
Allied around the exiled Ayatollah Ruhollah Khomeini, Iranians overthrew the Shah and his Western backers.
What is your own role in this government that is to come?
I would not have any position in the future government as such, being the president or a prime minister. And my job is not to be as such. I will be some sort of supervising their activities. I will give them guidance. And if I see some deviation or some mistake, I will remind them how to correct it, give the general guidance.
You would be, in effect, the strong man of Iran.
You may assume so.
What followed wasn't the euphoric sharing of power everyone hoped for, but a fight for control between the three sectors of Iranian society. The clerics, with Khomeini as their head, came out on top. Iran became an Islamic republic, and the secular reformists were pushed out. Many fled the country. A new constitution was drafted, setting up a hybrid system that combined theocratic rule with democratic elements under the umbrella of Islamic law. And here's where things start getting complicated. It's helpful to imagine it as a pyramid, with the supreme leader, the Grand Ayatollah, at the top. He is chosen by an assembly of experts, which is elected every 8 years by popular vote, as is a president and a parliament every 4 years. However, any laws the parliament drafts have to be approved by the Guardian Council, which is made up of senior clerics. These guys also decide who gets to run for president and who doesn't. The clerics are picked by the supreme leader and the judiciary, and the head of the judiciary is picked by the supreme leader. You see where I'm going with this. The president oversees the cabinet and economic and foreign policy, but has no control over the armed forces, which falls under, you guessed it, the supreme leader. There's another block next to the military, the Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps, which operates as an independent security force answerable directly to the supreme leader. And the IRGC has become a lot more than just an army, but I'll get to that. At the base of this pyramid, you have the voting electorate, the ordinary people of Iran. You have the economic merchants, the bazaar, and finally, the clerics. There's also other blocks like the Expediency Council and the Supreme National Security Council, but let's not confuse things any more than necessary. Just 1 year after the Islamic Republic was established, it faced another invasion in 1980, this time from its neighbor, Iraq. The war was backed by Western powers as well as Iran's own neighbors, who all felt threatened by Khomeini's revolution. The US had also begun to sanction Iran and its oil sector, isolating it economically and politically. A decade later, having survived one of the century's longest wars, the new Islamic Republic emerged having done what its predecessors failed to do: protect its borders. Khomeini emerged as a strong leader at the helm of a strong state. But there was a big problem bubbling beneath the surface. The pyramid he had built was lopsided. Its blocks didn't carry equal weight. For one thing, the IRGC had grown significantly, eclipsing the military and the government in power and authority. Following the war, the Revolutionary Guard was entrusted with protecting not just the country, but its revolutionary ideology. And over the next few decades, how it did that took on many forms, from backing proxy militias in Lebanon, Iraq, and Yemen, to smuggling oil over the border to bypass sanctions. Its economic power ballooned, taking over major assets like infrastructure, petrochemicals, and banking. And because it was only answerable to one man, it became something of a state within a state. To put this into perspective,
They took some of the best aspects of state centralization and then put it under the banner of the Ayatollah.
when US President Donald Trump wanted to punish Iran in 2020, he didn't go after its political or religious leaders. He assassinated Qasem Soleimani, the head of the IRGC, widely seen as the most powerful person in Iran after the Grand Ayatollah. In June 2025, when Israel attacked Iran, they went after the IRGC generals, not its military. The clerics also gained significant economic power through local charity organizations called bunyads. For example, the Mustafa Zan Foundation was set up in 1987 to provide for the families of people killed in the revolution. Today, it's one of the largest commercial enterprises in Iran, employing hundreds of thousands of people across a number of public and private sectors. The bunyads, which make up around 20% of Iran's economy, also answer only to the supreme leader.
What very interesting about this institution is that initially they started as a charitable institutions, then become a major economic forces, but the rhetoric and the discourse they try to do now, they try to basically present themselves is that they are a part of the national development projects, and this is part of the economic resistance of the state against basically the West.
Today, Iran looks a little more like this, with the bunyads and the IRGC controlling more than half the economy. This has limited the ability of the parliament and the president to pass meaningful economic policy or to respond to the impact of sanctions and rising inflation. When Iran is hit with a crisis, like a currency collapse, its elected officials have few levers to pull. And while the elected assembly of experts can technically influence the supreme leader, that's not really how it works in practice. In 1989, following the death of Ruhollah Khomeini, the assembly had to change the constitution to allow his chosen successor, former President Ali Khamenei, to become an Ayatollah. In reality, it was much more important that Khamenei had the backing of the IRGC and the clerics. So where are the other two sectors of Iran's society, the reformists and the bazaar? For one thing, the majority of the secular voices now live outside of Iran, which means those calling for change in the system have to operate within that same system. For example, in 2005, hardline conservative Mahmoud Ahmadinejad was elected president. He oversaw the so-called privatization of state assets, which transferred public entities to the IRGC and the bunyads, giving them government contracts worth tens of billions of dollars. He also expanded Iran's nuclear program and worsened the already tense relationship with the US, leading to even more crippling sanctions being imposed. When he left office in 2013, he was replaced by a reformist president, Hassan Rouhani. Rouhani was a cleric who sat on the Expediency Council, which advised the supreme leader, not exactly an outside voice. Rouhani, responding to his predecessor's deeply unpopular policies, tried to reverse the privatization Ahmadinejad had put in place and improve relations with the US, leading to the Iran nuclear deal in 2015.
در این راه ما هر سه قوه و همه ارکان نظام تحت نظر رهبری معظم انقلاب باید انسجام و وحدتمون رو حفظ بکنیم.
But Ayatollah Khamenei intervened, publicly criticizing Rouhani's government for abandoning the resistance economy and being too soft on nuclear power. Since the 1979 revolution, Iran's supreme leader has maintained a special relationship with the country's merchants. When young people protested against the state, like in 2009 during the Green Movement, and in 2022 after the death of Mahsa Amini, Iran's leadership could feel confident they still had the loyalty of the bazaar. But they've also borne the brunt of privatization policies, which saw their economic and political power shrink. So in December 2025, months after the devastating 12-day war with Israel and the US, Iran's economy went into a tailspin. The merchants went on strike, sparking a nationwide uprising echoing the events of 1979. When Ali Khamenei addressed the protests, there was one group in particular he was speaking to.
اولا قشر بازار و بازاری جزو وفادارترین قشرهای کشور به نظام اسلامی و به انقلاب اسلامی است. ما بازار رو خوب میشناسیم. به اسم بازار و بازاری نمیتوان با جمهوری اسلامی و با نظام اسلامی مقابله کرد.
Iran's government tried to appease the protesters by offering $7 a month to fill a shortage in people's earnings. But with a true cost of inflation much higher than the official numbers, that $7 was losing value with each passing day. And this wasn't happening by accident, but by design.
President Trump ordered Treasury and our OFAC division, Office of Foreign Asset Control, to put maximum pressure on Iran, and it's worked. Because in December, their economy collapsed. We saw a major bank go under. The central bank has started to print money. There is a dollar shortage. They are not able to get imports. And this is why the people took to the street. So this is economic statecraft. No shots.
When I say it, though, everybody fucking yells at me. Like, this is what's so crazy about especially this administration. Like, this is never said out loud. Normally, at any level of leadership in the United States of America, they don't say this out loud. Okay? It's known in the rest of the world. Everybody knows this. Like, no matter how mad you get at like Turkey or whatever, no matter how much like currency mismanagement takes place, everyone ultimately understands that America is fucking around. And usually America doesn't ever reveal this position. And it's really interesting that now under the Trump administration, they're openly saying it. You know, they're just like, yeah, we're hitting their economy as hard as we can through the Treasury Department to ensure that their economy collapses in and of itself, to foment instability, and to hopefully starve them hard enough that they fight back against their government. It's very interesting.
Fired, and things are moving in a very positive way here.
And here's where Iran's balancing act ultimately fails. The more power the IRGC and the clerics get, the more unchallenged power the supreme leader wields, the weaker the government becomes. And faced with widespread discontent and international pressure for regime change, it's left with only one tool to retain control: force. A century ago, Iran was a weak state, unable to protect itself from the outside. But it had a strong society, a rich culture, and a young generation eager for a revolution. But at the cost of consolidating power, it has instead become a strong state with a weak society, an upside-down pyramid crushing those at the bottom. Ali Khamenei is now 86 years old. He's getting ready to transfer this enormous power. But to who? What happens if there's no consensus on who comes next? If his successor doesn't wield the same influence? Or if the demands of the protesters for real change grows too loud to ignore? The answers to these questions shape not only the future of Iran, but the future of the region. A region bruised and battered by war, crippled by foreign sanctions, with vultures still circling overhead.
This is also part of the reason why I say that, like, in countries like Iran, even in countries like Russia, like, a decapitation strike on the existing leadership will not actually yield any positive results for the population, nor will it yield popular or positive results for the rest of the region, especially Iran, which is an unimaginably diverse country. Like in many respects, the Ayatollahs and the IRGC's like ruthless system is in some ways what's keeping society intact. So what comes next in that power vacuum will be incredibly destabilizing. And you already have different ethnic groups in the country, many of which are backed by America, by the way, already salivating at the prospect of American strikes. All of the different Iranian Kurdish ethnic groups have already consolidated power amongst themselves and created a new like autonomous region, or want to create a new autonomous region. That's going to be one of the forces that they have to deal with. Yes, I know, Turkish guy, once again, blaming the Kurds, but it's not a secret. You can wait for, I don't know, the Trump administration to openly reveal their position on this. That might come in a week or so, given the track record of this administration. Trump could easily come out and be like, the Kurds in Iran, they want freedom. They want, they're so good. They're so good. We're going to balkanize Iran and we're going to use the Kurds in Balochistan. Balochistan independence. Believe it, folks. So, you know, there are different ethnic groups with different interests, and everything is just like basically held together with ticker tape at this point. So we'll see what happens. But I do think that more so than the bombing campaigns, the reason why there was an uprising of the merchant class was because of the economy. And I don't think America is going to turn around and you know, fix the economy anytime soon. So the way I see it, I mean, this looks like a final play. The Iranian political forces don't want it to escalate. The IRGC seemingly is ready for war. The Ayatollah is a fairly restrained mediator. So we shall see. We have demonstrated an unbelievable level of flexibility. I mean, the maximalist demands from the American government is fucking insane. And for the record, it's just death and destruction, either tomorrow or death and destruction while Iran puts up a fight, or death and destruction regardless after Iran dismantles its ballistic missiles capabilities, which I don't think they will. But ultimately, the goal is destabilization, balkanization of Iran, destabilization, and utter destruction, like turning Iran into Libya. And obviously, the Ayatollah doesn't want that. But, I mean, they have a gun to their head. And just as though they've had a gun to their head last time with the 12-day war, Israel basically forced their hand to retaliate, something that they really don't like doing. I think Trump's escalations this time around will cause a more severe reaction. But we also have, ironically enough, a more diminished American military capacity. So there's that element here too. Like, they just don't have the same munitions. They're spread too thin. And if their goal is not to protect their assets, but to also protect Israel, that's going to be very difficult. It's much cheaper for Iran to fucking lob missiles where, I mean, their entire defense industry is designed around doing that while withstanding incoming fire, right? So it's much cheaper for Iran to deploy Shahed drones and missiles and just keep fucking pummeling Israel's Iron Dome and penetrate it like they did, once again, as they did in the 12-day war. What is this? This could have paved the way for the guy who hates Hassan to be elected. Lauren Boebert is calling Representative Tony Gonzalez to resign after leaked text showed him repeatedly pressuring a staffer for nude photos. She pushed back. He kept asking. She later took her own life. Resign? What the fuck?